About to watch Superman, gentlemen. Are you ready?
No. Yes.
Hey y'all, thank you so much for stopping by to watch me draw and talk about some movies and TV. Today's topic's gonna be Superman. I haven't made a video of this style in a little while, but I knew I was wanting to do this movie back when I first started making these kinds of videos, and it's finally here, so I am very eager to get started talking about it. I have been a lifelong Superman fan for as long as I can remember, and I was not very happy with the way that Superman was previously handled with the whole Zack Snyder, Henry Cavill take on the character in his universe. So whenever they announced that James Gunn was going to wipe the slate clean and start fresh with some new faces, I followed the movie very closely and I had high hopes for this movie to begin with. So a couple of my friends and I decided to get together and go see this movie. In short, I thought it was absolutely amazing. At first, when I walked out of the movies, I could not think of a single flaw in the movie, and I have thought of one little thing that bugs me, but I'll talk about that here in just a minute. In general, I really loved the tone and the feel of the movie. It felt much more in line with Silver Age, campy comic book stuff, but it still had a healthy amount of dramaticness, if that's a word. That it still felt like Superman without feeling like it was made for little kids. David Corenswet was my number one pick that I wanted for Superman when I was following the casting, and I was absolutely over the moon when I found out that he was casted. And I'm proud to say he did a very good job. He looks like Superman, he just sounds like Superman, he feels like Superman. And this is what I've been hoping to see for such a long time, and it's such a relief to finally see somebody fill those shoes. And I deeply appreciate that they went with the approach of how Superman would deal with the modern world without making it cynical. This feels like a little bit more of a accurate inline depiction of what that would look like compared to what the previous movies have been trying to do with the idea. Lois, Jimmy, and Lex were also really fun. Lois in particular, I did not care too much for the Amy Adams take of Lois. And I like that Lois here has a little more bite to her. She's a little more cynical, but she's also just extremely smart. And she asks Clark the hard questions. I really like the scene where she's interviewing him and she's kind of drilling into him a little bit. And I love that she's not just a damsel in distress and she actively takes place in the plot, because that is the best kind of Lois Lane to have. She feels like the perfect complement to Clark in every way, and she feels like she was ripped straight out of the animated series, just like Superman was, and I cannot think of anything at all that I would change about this depiction of Lois. Also, her chemistry with Clark is fantastic. Jimmy was not in the last version of these Superman movies, and I feel like he's always been kind of left to the side in favor of focusing on Lois a little more. And here he is given a lot to do. He has his own little side plot, and he also helps progress and take down Lex at some point. But the only thing that I have a problem with is that Jimmy and Clark are supposed to be like best buddies, and they only have like one scene together. And obviously it's implied that they're already friends, you know. It's just I was hoping to see a little bit more of that come through. But in terms of the characterization and the casting and the look, this guy's got it, and James Gunn managed to get all three of the main cast right, considering that Jimmy is a ladies' man and he's got like this dorky look and he's like the short guy, and he feels like he was ripped straight off the page, and it's such a refresh to see Jimmy Olsen yet again. Now Lex Luthor is probably one of my favorite parts of this movie, because he is such a generational hater, and that is exactly what Lex is supposed to be, because Lex is obviously supposed to be this guy who thinks he's the ideal man. He's supposed to think he's got the brains. He's supposed to think that he's done everything right, and so he's just absolutely outraged when this random alien comes in and gets all this attention for just being a good guy when he didn't have to really work for what he has, and that just turns Lex into this extremely jealous, angry, bitter man who has like the world at his fingertips. And he's really evil here. He does some really messed up stuff, like when he shoots that guy in front of Superman just because he knew Superman would not like to see it, or when he takes his dog, just cloning Superman just so he has a way to fight back, and him taking so much joy in beating the snot out of Superman, and his little codes where he's like completely identified all of Superman's fighting moves so he can fight him back equally. Like, that's just such a in-character thing for Lex to be doing, and Nicholas Hoult plays off that jealous like incel kind of vibe so well, and I just absolutely love it. Extremely massive improvement from what we had previously. Crypto is also in this movie. I love Crypto because I've always had a soft spot for dogs, and I have a dog that reminds me a lot of Crypto, where Crypto is just extremely disobedient and just this really wild, difficult dog. And at the end, it's revealed it's because he belongs to Supergirl, and Supergirl is not a very disciplinary owner, for lack of a better term. And I just really like Crypto. I love that he had a place in the plot, but he didn't really need to be in every scene, and he wasn't shoved into every little bit. And I like the running gag with him stealing all of Mr. Terrific's gadgets out of the sky, and the personal beef that Mr. Terrific has with this random dog. Speaking of Mr. Terrific, the Justice Gang is also in this movie, and they are all really fun to watch. Guy Gardner is exactly as much of a jerk as you think he'd be, and Hawkgirl is in this movie. She has her own little memorable moment where she kills the evil dictator of that random country that I cannot remember. And like mentioned, Mr. Terrific is a huge part of this movie. That sequence where he's got Lois in the bubble and he's taking out all these agents, and he's got like the music playing in the background, that felt like something you'd rip straight out of a Guardians of the Galaxy movie. And I'm glad that he's getting some representation, because the only things that I've seen this guy in are the DC Animated Universe's Justice League and the CW Arrow TV series. He was not nearly as cool as he was in that show as he is in this movie. The only place I have issue with the Justice Gang is it feels like they steal a little bit of attention from the more traditional Superman characters. What I mean by that is, in places where you could have a relationship between Superman and Jimmy and Lois, and bring Perry, Steve, and Kat all together, they're kind of treated off as like little side characters, and they're given a little bit to do. But I feel like in a movie called Superman, it would have been nice to have a little bit more of like the main cast be involved, and you see a lot more of the other superheroes. Which, don't get me wrong, this movie does a great job of telling a self-contained story while setting up a bigger universe that you want to see more of. It's just I wish we could have toned that back a little bit just to make room for, you know, Steve and Perry and all the other ones who kind of got pushed off to the side. And the climax of this movie was really memorable for me as well. I like that Superman spent some time on his parents' farm. I like how down to earth that his parents are, and it reminds me a lot of people that live around the place I live. And that's something I feel like Superman movies have always kind of missed out on, is the small town vibe of Kansas that Superman's supposed to come from. And I feel like they really nailed a lot of that. And I really like that it's very much made clear in this movie that Superman's Earth parents are the one that gave him, you know, his heroic aspect. I really got misty-eyed over this section where he's talking to his dad, and I really love that his parents feel like just small town, humble people, and they created a really good, humble superhero because of that. There's also the twist where his Kryptonian parents are evil. I'm not sure how likely that is to stick. I won't be super upset if they stay evil, because at the end of the day, I don't think that his Kryptonian parents make all that much of the difference. But I feel like in a future movie where he fights Brainiac, they'll probably retcon that. And hopes for the future, honestly, this couldn't have been much better as a start for the DC universe. I would honestly not be upset if they pulled Robert Pattinson's Batman into these movies, and I genuinely cannot wait to see David Cornsweet pop up as Superman somewhere else. I'm really excited to see every other project that James Gunn comes out with, because I have full faith that there may be a brighter future in place for DC. What did you think of the movie? Comment down, let me know, let's have a discussion. Do you agree with me on all these things, or do you think I'm just full of it and I don't know what I'm talking about? But I hope you guys enjoyed sitting here and watching me draw and talk about some stuff, and I guess I will see you in the next one. Bye bye.